Professor Peter Piot has used his life to bring science to the people. He's transformed the world and given us the chance to live, and with purpose. He co-discovered Ebola in 1976, the year it first appeared in what was then Zaire, followed by research and leadership on HIV and AIDS. His book, No Time to Lose, documents this extraordinary journey, but it now has an update after Peter was infected with COVID-19 and continues to live with the longer-term consequences of a disease we're beginning to understand. On a personal note, he brought me into AIDS and global health, and more importantly, he has done the same for many more young people whose lives today are a testament to his. So it really is an honor for me to bring you this conversation with Peter Piot. You mentioned Beijing, where too many new confirmed cases have been reported linked to a market, again, a wet market. What would you do? Because you've advised the government of China in the past. What would you advise them to do this time around?
I think it's happened everywhere. You know, Singapore had migrant workers in the dormitories. In Korea, it's around some nightclubs, and there will be more coming. It could be a school, a university. It could be a company. We've seen in the US around meat packaging and slaughterhouses, but not necessarily shut down the whole of Beijing or the whole of China. A country like Vietnam also has some experience, Mongolia, by kind of putting some neighborhoods in quarantine. And I think that's probably where, unfortunately, we'll have to go into. Will that be acceptable in all societies? I'm not so sure, but it strikes me that one of the highest density cities in the world, Hong Kong, has been quite successful in containing the spread of this virus. And that's where we have to learn from. But a good surveillance system, a good public health system is going to be absolutely key, and then acting really fast.
In closing, what do you think of the world today, a world in which we now have this global pandemic, a world in which we're struggling with mass unemployment, widening social inequities, travel bans, very limited physical movement, and on top of all that, misinformation, mistrust in our governments and institutions, and now a social uprising after the death of George Floyd, but not limited to him alone?
It's hard to be optimistic in today's world. On the other hand, let's take a historic perspective. I couldn't think of any long period in history where globally the world was not in turmoil. There weren't conflicts. I mean, there's some exceptions regionally. For example, in Europe, we've had now peace for 75 years, unprecedented. That's thanks to the European Union. Many people forget that, but that is, never happened before. I'm from Belgium, and we've been constantly in war every maybe 20 years, and sometimes, more often. We also are in a world where, of course, the overall balance of power is shifting. And the center of the universe is moving back to Asia. And when I say back in Europe or in the US, people stare at me, and because they don't know their history. This is how it used to be before, let's say, around the 18th century. When you look at the world's, economic outputs, and so that was that was the reality. So we're going into a major shift of power relations, but with the social media, with the speed of information, some of that is positive. It can lead to faster solving problems, and I think that's what we're seeing now. For example, with COVID-19, exchange of scientific information is really fantastic. When you think that the virus was sequenced first in China at the beginning, I think January, maybe the 8th or the 9th of January was released, and the whole world started working on it. And the first vaccine development work started already in January. I remember that CEPI, the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovation, on whose board I am, during the World Economic Forum in Davos, that's the last week of January, we issued already contracts to develop a vaccine. So that's the positive side. On the negative side, it can exacerbate tensions, and that goes from here in the UK, for example, there were quite some racist attacks against people of Chinese ethnic origin because they were accused of being at the origin of this epidemic. We have fake news going around. Also, tensions that could be resolved through dialogue are much harder to be solved because, one, we've got a social media that are often fed by the most extreme positions. But also, when I think of myself, I spend my days now in front of a screen, and we're all going to become zombies. There is a big difference between interacting through video screens and face to face. There's no doubt about that, and particularly to solve difficult issues. And we'll see how it goes. But I think that we will come out of this in a different world. But the economic shock and the poverty and the inequalities that it's going to create, and also mental health issues, for example, we are just at the beginning, and I think this will require also an unprecedented type of solidarity. So the shock we should be able to absorb, as long as it's not going to last too long. That's again why we need a vaccine, and desperately.
You can listen to the full conversation with Peter Piot at thechinacurrent.com or your preferred podcast platform. Thank you.